Today we're doing an RCSB breakdown to learn how to do the voice of Rick Sanchez. So come on, Morty, we're going on an adventure. So grab onto your stuff. If the only thing you have are your tiny testicles, that's cool, because we're going to blips and shits! Wubba-dubba-dub-dub! Welcome back to Character Voice Building with me, Nando Garza, and I am here to help you build and develop better character voices. So, today we have Rick Sanchez. This is obviously one of my favorite characters in animation history. Is such a cool and complex character. But anyway, so this is a voice that I hadn't really started exploring until, for this video, really. And it is a very fascinating voice. It has several levels. Almost all of the elements in the RCSB are filled in for Rick. So this is going to be a fun one. Let's start with the field category with aesthetic. Aesthetic is, again, the general sound of the character. The really general sound is gruff, low sounding, and worn out. There's a reason I'm saying low sounding. So we'll touch on that later. Then we have demeanor. Demeanor is considered the general kind of person that the character is or wants to appear to be. In this case, it's very condescending, apathetic, has a god complex, irritable, pretending not to care, irritating, thinks he can always, have everything under control, forceful, that kind of stuff. So he has a lot of attitude attached to his demeanor. Then we move on to the instrumentalization category, beginning with the mechanics. The mechanics is the physical technique used to produce desired sound. So his voice is kind of halfway nasality, and adding distortion in the same vein of like clearing your throat, like that kind of thing. It's also something similar that happens with Tibetan monk chants, that kind of that kind of thing. You don't have to know how to do that, of course, but it's that same kind of feeling. In terms of the nasality, there's only just enough to make it that kind of a little bit, but it's not completely there, because otherwise you lose a lot of the body of it. You lose a lot of that kind of lower sounding voice. So that's the mechanics of it, and we'll delve a little bit deeper into like the distortion aspect of it and stuff like that later. The tonality, this is the bass pitch or range of pitch. It's actually a mid to low mid pitch. It's not really a low pitch. If you actually map it out to a keyboard or something like that, it's actually not that low. It sounds lower because of the distortion. And in general, the range is restricted to just about an octave and a half, maybe even less. So, for example, when you have something like this, Morty, we're going on an adventure, Morty. We're going on an adventure, Morty. See, that's without the distortion. We're going on an adventure, Morty. We're going on an adventure, Morty. So the pitch is not that low, but because of the distortion, it appears lower. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I guess you could go lower, but he doesn't. That's not really how he sounds. Maybe in some things, maybe when he's getting really, really deep into something, perhaps, but it tends to be more mid to mid-low. Then we have musicality, which is the variance in pitch and rhythm. This one is really cool. It really slaps hard like rap in terms of the rhythm. There's a kind of continuity to it, and it's kind of steady and forceful. The pitch tends to have like plateaus of monotone chunks sprinkled in with transitional pitches to go to another plateau, a different pitch, or the same one. And it's just kind of peppered in to add a little bit of variance, and could be returning to the base pitch. So to give you an example of this in terms of the pitch first, those plateaus and those things, like there's a quote that he says, listen to your sister, Morty. To live is to risk it all. Otherwise, you're just an inert chunk of randomly assembled molecules drifting wherever the universe blows you. Okay? So listen to it. It starts up a little bit, then it plateaus, and then it goes up, and then maybe changes a little bit. It's like, listen to your sister, Morty. Listen to your sister, Morty. Okay? Then, to live is to risk it all. To live is to risk it. Live is to risk it all. Live is to risk it all. Okay, then otherwise, just an inert chunk of... And this sentence actually is pretty consistent, just sprinkling in little tiny variances of pitch along the way. Otherwise, you're just an inert chunk of randomly assembled molecules drifting wherever the universe blows you. There we go. In terms of the rhythm, it is very consistent. It's very, again, like hard rap. It is just like Momo, Morty, because it's very that kind of thing. So then we have resonance, which is how full or thin the voice sounds. It's, I would say, medium. It's not super, super resonant. Only, and it's really only medium because of the distortion. Without the distortion, it wouldn't be very full and kind of teetering towards the thin side because of that partial nasality. I can't say that word, nasality. So if you're talking like this, Morty, and then you take away the distortion, Morty, it's kind of like this. So as you can see, it's not a lot of resonance. It's not like this. It's also not super thin like that. It's kind of in the middle. And if you just add the distortion back in, that's kind of what you get. And then finally, the last of the instrumentalization category, we have dynamics, which is the range between the lowest and highest points of loudness or emotion. He rarely gets quiet. Even at his quietest, you could still hear him from across the room if you were in the room with him. He does get very loud, though, of course. So even if he's trying to whisper something, it's still like, Morty, this is what we're going to do, Morty. It's not very, you can still hear it from across the room. And then, of course, if you go into the loud stuff, it's just like, blips and shit! It's very loud. Anyway, so that's dynamics. Then we move on to the texture category, and that starts with grit, the amount of lower vocal distortion. There's none, really. There's not enough, not a low enough pitch or dynamics to really get to it. And also the distortion is really what takes over. So having both is kind of impossible. It's very, I actually don't know if it's possible to do, but in this case, I'm just going to say no. And that kind of distortion rather than grit is what takes over. So let's move on to distortion. That's the amount of upper vocal distortion. There's a heavy amount of distortion in it, and it's a very important part of the voice. It's not there all the time, but, if he's screaming, it's always there. But it's really present in every sentence. Maybe not the entire sentence, but in every sentence. And this is done, again, by using the clearing your throat technique, which uses the false vocal folds. So this is an exercise. Just think that you're about to give a speech or something like that, and you just try to clear your throat to be able to speak better. So you go, there it is. That's what it is. Then say ma while doing the clearing. You clear your throat and then say ma, Morty. Okay? That's the general idea. You can feel it right there. Morty. There you go. Then we have air, which is how much audible airflow is present in the voice. A small amount of air is really present throughout the whole phrase. Kind kind of think of it like the Swifty song, which is very breathy. It's like, oh, you gotta get swifty. You gotta get swifty in here. Ah. So there's that kind of amount of air. That's exaggerated. So take that and dial it back just a little bit, and that's what he uses in his regular speech. So it's not like, Morty, what are you doing, Morty? It's also not, what are you doing, Morty? That's like no air at all. It's somewhere in between. It's like, what are you doing, Morty? I have no idea what you're doing, Morty. So you can hear it a little bit. It's not breathy. It's not completely not breathy. It's somewhere in the middle. Then we move to the momentum category, starting with speed, which is how fast the character talks. He's a fast talker, for sure. That harkens back to the musicality of it, the rhythm of it. He knows exactly what he's talking about at all times, so he puts it out fast and very clear-minded. Although he does stutter in that kind of thing, he does have a very steady flow of ideas and communication there. So it is pretty fast in general. Now, the flow, which is how interrupted a sentence or a thought is, it's pretty steady. Again, it's that steady rhythm that goes through the sentence. It is peppered in with stutters and ums and burps and stuff like that. But even those are still consistent with the general flow, because you might have like, all right, Morty, let's go to the blips and chits. So it's still like, let's go, Morty, to the blips and chits. There's still that flow there. So it's not really interrupted. Then we move on to localization. Localization category with the accent element, which is the regional pronunciation of the language spoken. It's just general American. Enunciation, how clear or muddled the speech is the next element. When he's very drunk, he can be pretty muddled and slushy, of course. Normally, he varies between super enunciated and a bit more relaxed, depending on the situation. So if he's scolding Morty or something like that, it's like, what did I tell you, Morty? It's very Morty. You should have given me the portal gun when I asked you, Morty. It's very, very well enunciated. And then when he's more reflective or something like that, it's less enunciated. It's a little bit more muddled. It's more like, yeah, I don't know, Morty. It doesn't really matter. We're just little specks in the universe. Nobody cares. You can still hear perfectly, but it's not as that kind of exaggerated enunciation. Then last of localization, we have inflections, which is the modulation of intonation or pitch throughout the sentence. And this, I really enjoy this one, is the ends of the sentences don't quite have a definite ending pitch. It tends to be lower, but just barely, or practically the same pitch as the previous few words. A sentence usually starts going up, then that general plateau we talked about, and then the subtle dip at the end. To give you an example, instead of going like, I told you, Morty, I'm the most intelligent man in the universe, Morty. Which that's how I would go about it. I'm the most intelligent man in the universe, Morty. He only does a slight dip. I'm the most intelligent man in the universe, Morty. Or maybe just a little lower, but it doesn't go all the way down the way you would think, at least here in the States. So having that kind of monotony and ending just a bit, it's kind of unsettling because it doesn't really resolve anything. And I think that's kind of on purpose, because you feel like, yeah, you don't know what's going on next. You don't know when something is ending. You know when something is beginning, in all sense of the word. So it is kind of unsettling to have that always like, there's something coming. I don't know. You feel that? It's annoying. So anyway, that's the inflections. I really like that one. That's a fun little one that really gives it that attitude, that kind of feeling that you get from Rick. Then the last category is dimensionality, starting with the reactivity element, which is how the character reacts when being startled, amused, scared, etc., etc. It's very generous in vocalizing his reactivity to things. So he's like, ha ha ha, or like, wow, wow, Beth, really? Or just like, So you can hear a lot of his internal emotions actually being verbalized. He can also get extremely angry and loud and explosive, as we've talked about. And he, of course, has many catchphrases he uses. So those are part of the reactivity as well. That kind of wubba-dubba-dub-dub is kind of a celebration thing. So yeah, that's reactivity. Then we have quirks, which is the pronunciation of certain phonemes, such as a lisp or trill. Morty always sounds like being said as a diss, or like he's blaming him for something. Perhaps not always, but that it has that kind of stank, you know. So it's never just like Morty. It's like Morty, like duh. It's your fault, Morty. There's like a elongation of Morty that happens, and it kind of gives it that stank, which is very interesting. Other than that, there's no real phonemic quirks that he uses. And the last element we have is tics, which is non-language sounds. And of course, this is a big important part of Rick's voice, and that is the burps. The burps being the number one, stutters being number two, and all sorts of little ums and ahs and stuff like that sprinkled throughout. But the burp is very important. From what I understand, I think what at least Justin used to do is he would record the burps kind of separately, and then when he's reading, he would just kind of make a pause. Then in editing, they would add that in, and then the rest kept going. If you can do it all like in one sentence, just going through it, sure, that's fine, but you don't have to. I can't. I used to be able to know how to like breathe in air and burp. I can't anymore. So anyway, but that's the burps, stutters, like Morty. So yeah, that's all we have for Rick. This was a fun one. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something. I hope you can develop your Rick a little bit better, perhaps better than I can. I don't know if I'm that great at it. I will have attached the PDF of this entire RCSB breakdown for you to download and check at your own leisure. Play with the different elements. Try to do Rick's voice and then change the enunciation or change the flow or the distortion, the air, just to see how it affects, how you can control a voice. So thank you again. Please like and subscribe if you like it. And if you can share it, that would be amazing too. It would really help the channel. I've heard that a lot of people have a hard time finding this channel. So if we can get more likes, more shares, more people will be able to find it. And I think more people will be able to benefit from this kind of thing. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care. Be nice. And yeah, see you next time.